Okay. Welcome to the Cougar Land Podcast review, and one of the most attentive people, Mike Walker, and we've got Peter West, a surprise guest. That rhymes. I'm going to make that on my next whatever rap song probably. But here we are. I haven't seen Peter in forever. Peter hasn't seen me except on the podcast. He and Mike were really good friends. They used to fly kites together and roller skate a lot in the North 40 area, I think.
Backwards.
Yeah. Backwards, did you do that thing? Yeah, okay. So you've been watching these. Let me ask Peter first. What have you been thinking? Where has this taken you watching these podcasts?
I tell you what, Lenny, it's taken me down memory lane big time. So the way I discovered it was, Mike, what was it, 2 weeks ago? A little over 2 weeks ago, I finally reached out to Mike via Facebook. I found, I don't know, 5-6 weeks ago, the Vicenza American High School Facebook page. And I was scrolling through some posts, and I saw that Mike posted something from the pictures of when he went back to Italy last summer of the school. And it took me a few days afterwards, and I looked at my wife. I said, all right, is this weird that I sent him an instant message via Facebook? Is that over the line? She's like, no, do it. So finally I got the gumption up a few days later and sent Mike an IM. It was a Friday afternoon. I'm winding down work, getting ready to go on vacation. I'm like, you know what? Let me pull up Facebook and I'll send Mike a message. And I think within 60 seconds or 2 minutes, I'm back. And his first confession, then he sent me the link to this podcast that you guys did. And then before I got to watch the podcast, he comes clean and says he gets my name wrong in the podcast. So
that's okay. I mean, it's kind of hard to mess up Peter. What did he call you, Dieter?
Yeah,
I don't know. You know, right. Dieter from Germany.
I knew it the second it came out of my mouth. I was like, oh my God. And because we hadn't seen one another, I thought I'd be able to sneak that one through and not get caught.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're using I believe you're using your wife's Zoom account. It says Jam and Jen. So we're going to call you Jam and Jen for a while.
I don't know how to change the name.
So Mike did calling you Peter West, Jam and Jen. Got it. Same thing. Totally. But no, it's like, I do this because I think a few years ago I started podcasting with a bunch of Navy guys. And, I was like, Teddy Spittle had done a great job starting a Vicenza Cougar website before Facebook. And so some people stayed in touch because you remember once you leave, how do you get a hold of Mike Walker? It's a guy I knew. Everything had a finality. It's like a movie with a finish. Like, I'm in this time in the show and I'm gone. And then later your life became, I live here. I've been living here. Nothing's changed. I'm still here 10 years later. Hey, we're here 20 years later. I haven't moved that much, in many people's cases, right? So you get a podcast.
I think we all exchanged like 2 letters after we PCS'd. We got to, after like the second letter, we're like, I ain't writing the letters all the time.
And you're like, it's a guy. I feel conflicted.
Right.
Dear Peter, my friend, my dear friend, I miss you in the Villaggio bus.
Right.
That's how it works, right?
Right.
He's like writing to you, dude, I'm at the 7-Eleven. They've got 12 different kinds of candy bars, and I just got a 72-ounce Slurpee. Can't get that at the snack bar. What's going on in your lame-ass Vicenza food land? Eating those hamburgers, right? Whatever. Right? Yeah. I mean, your Mike's like, screw you, man. You and your fancy candy bars. No, but it's kind of how it goes. Where did you go from after Vicenza? Where'd you go, Peter?
So we left in '83, the summer after my 9th grade year, same year that Mike left and went back to Indianapolis. We went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky for a year, and then my dad retired. And I'm the youngest of 5, and when he retired, we were this close to coming back to Vicenza. He had gotten a GS job, or he thought he had gotten a GS job back in Vicenza, Italy. So we were going back as a civilian, and I was so excited. And then all of a sudden, I still don't know what happened, but it fell through, and I ended up in South Alabama at Fort Rucker. So I spent my junior and senior year at Fort Rucker, Alabama, in a small town outside called Daleville, and then ended up going to Auburn in East Alabama. and was an ROTC at Auburn. Went to the military myself after college, and ended up in Georgia for 3 years at Hunter Army Airfield in Georgia, back at Fort Rucker, to Korea to Fort Drum, New York, to finally getting out and moving here to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where my wife is from, which is ironically only 45 minutes north of where Mike lives.
And that's crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we've already got plans set up for the end of August to get together.
That's good, dude. I mean, it's funny. You obviously joined the Army based on those forts you were naming. That's just my guesstimate. You know, I didn't realize it. Like, if you were given a choice, like, we were not doing a study, like a Google search, a deep Google dive when we were kids. It was like, that uniform looks cool. That guy said something. They got cool, a lot of McDonald's by that base. Oh yeah, because we didn't have McDonald's in Italy. I think I'll get stationed there.
Yeah.
But for me, like, if you've done an in-depth study, like Air Force, you get this. You get to go. It's more of a like corporate, like Google. You know what I mean? And then Army is very military, very linear, orderly. And then the Marines is just hardcore, do more with less. And then the Navy, that's a whole other thing, man. That's
Absolutely.
bunch of disco dancers on a boat touring the world. Like, go on. What do you say, Mike?
Yeah.
No, and you know what else is kind of weird too is just so Peter had his plan, right? ROTC, and we've heard this from a lot of other people on these podcasts, right? A lot of military brats take that route, and in the late 80s, why? Right? To pay for school, right? Mm-hmm. So you figure, hey man, I'm going to knock out some free school, and I'm going to get my life off, and I had a lot of other friends do the same thing, and lo and behold, the 90s came in. All of a sudden, everybody's off in Iraq and Kuwait shooting and getting shot at, and they're like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa. Yeah, it kind of changed. It changed things.
Absolutely. The way I think about it and explain it is, if we were from West Virginia and our parents worked in the coal mine and our grandfathers worked in the coal mine, we're probably going to end up working in the coal mine. We were so ingrained in the military that, again, youngest of five, all five of us ended up in the military at one point or another. It's just, it's that easy path transition, and it's so comfortable. It feels right. It's like wearing a perfect suit that just feels so good. And I have to say, when I got out in '98, I was first time I'd ever been a civilian in my life, or not around a military installation, and I was dang nervous. I felt like I don't know what I was walking into.
Yeah, I remember those days, the transition to the transition.
Yeah.
To the transition.
Yeah.
But for me, I was ready to be done with it. Yeah. I remember I rolled up in a limousine. I just got divorced, so I was with my friend and some ladies in this limousine, maybe having a drink or something, or maybe even smoking weed. I don't know. But we rolled up in front of the base. I'm like, haha, I'm done with you.
All at no cost to you.
Of course. I'm like, I'm done with you, man. I'm done with this. And I wasn't mad at the military. I was like, it's just a phase. I was not, angry at the military for anything. I get out on a good discharge. But the thing is like, I didn't aspire to be an officer. I didn't try to make rank for the first few years because I was too busy getting in trouble. Then the next 3 years, everything accelerated. I'm like, oh yeah, I could do this all day long. This is easy. I just never really applied. The thing is about applying yourself, right? So that was that experience. But I got to California. I got to go around the world. I think that is a lot more satisfying than some people that might have got stationed in some, that place they threaten to send you if you screw up. We're going to send you to the middle of nowhere and you're going to peel potatoes,
So did either of you guys get stuck in the Middle East or even Bosnia or anything like that?
Yeah. The guys were actually going AWOL, when we were going to Desert Storm. I go, oh, you thought you joined this to wear this little ice cream man suit and dance with girls in nightclubs. You didn't know that there was a war element to your job? You were just here for the GI Bill? There's like a guy called me, I met a girl, you understood. I go, no, I don't. I'm married and I'm leaving. I'm going to war. Well, what's your fucking problem? But you get my point.
Dude, I've heard a ton of stories of people that I knew from overseas that ran into other people that they knew from overseas while they're, in a tent in, the desert of southern Iraq or wherever. And they're like, whoa. And I hear those stories all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I, fortunately or unfortunately, I ended up straddling the two Gulf Wars. I was commissioned out of ROTC in 1990, but so
it was quick
in August of 90, but I had another year of school left, or another 9 months of school. So I ended up in flight school right at the tail end of the first Gulf War. So by the time I got out, everything was done.
What were you flying?
UH-60 Blackhawk helicopters.
Oh, the very popular tool over there.
Yeah. Again, back to the coal mine scenario. My dad was an Army aviator, and then he retired and at Fort Rucker, which is the home of Army aviation. So it was like, for me, like going to the coal mine. It was the family business. It is what you did.
Yeah. For the record, Lenny, I would have gone AWOL as well if I would have had to get in a Blackhawk with Peter at the controls. I probably would have been a little unsettled there.
I might have too. I remember walking up to the aircraft for the first time at like 24, 25 years old, tossing these keys up, snickering to myself, like, they have no idea who they've given responsibility to.
Well, that's the thing, right? These choppers. So I kind of mirrored more Top Gun in the Navy life. You must have watched Blue Thunder with, you know what I mean? You watched the movie Blue Thunder, the evil helicopter that's going around with infrared and all this tech that, oh my gosh, this chopper can take over a city. I love that. It's kind of like Jaws, but of a helicopter in the sky. Right?
That movie Firebirds, remember that came out after Top Gun? It was so cool for you Navy guys. Firebirds came out and we were like this. Oh, crap.
Well, Top Gun is one of the greatest recruiting tools ever. People watch that and join the Army. Or people watch that and they join the Air Force thinking, not realizing the airplanes are landing on a carrier.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that was...
well, it was in response to Officer and a Gentleman, which, killed recruiting for 3 or 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
And then...
I think it probably made a lot more guys going through, OTC, going through, they said, we better brush up on our karate in case they challenge me from the tough neighborhood I grew up in and I have a tough drill instructor. I better be, at least a black belt before I go in, right?
If I saw Lou Gossett Jr. today, I would just drop and start doing push-ups.
That's right.
You're like, that was a very interesting movie because that is a truism. I mean, around those officers clubs, those officers bases, there were certain kinds, if it's in a poorer town, marrying an officer was like, ooh, if I marry him or her, I can get out of Dodge. It's like in California, if you marry somebody that works for Google, your life is kind of set. I noticed that kind of strange part in the States. Oh yeah, I'll marry you, and even other countries, like marrying a soldier or a sailor or a Marine or an airman, was a solution to getting out of Dodge, was a green card, or was a solid life. And then I saw people that did that for many years and go, oh, wow, this is a crazy story. We haven't even reviewed any podcasts, but we're going to do that. I'm going to say, I helped a guy get his VA benefits. He was a warrant officer. And this is a weird off thing. It's like everything's supposed to be sunshine on the podcast. So I'm helping him. I'm like, look, you get your disability, you get your retirement. Man, you're made. You don't have to go anywhere. He's like, oh, no, I got to work. I go, well, what about hanging out with your wife every day? He's like, I don't know her. Because the guy had been deployed for 25 years and only home 87% of the time.
Oh,
so
yeah.
when I did the math, this was a gal he met at an enlisted men's club, an NCO club on an Army base that was across from our Navy base in Oakland. And they had a great night, and Belle Biv DeVoe was playing, and the songs of the 90s were jamming, and poof, that was something. And then we were deployed, and you would write letters and see them again, and then go back and forth. And the guy was in every kind of war since then. He gets back, he's like, I'm not going to go to work. He didn't know how to stay home anymore. And so that's a weird thing if you do the lifer route, if you take that route, pretty bizarre.
Absolutely.
Which reminds me of Officer and a Gentleman, because, there were a bunch of people that got married on my ship that get divorced the day they get out or before. There was a lot of that because it was the location. You weren't really looking for your ideal person to be with. Maybe if they were a military brat woman or man and they married you and you were in the military, they'd understand the culture even deeper. They're like, yeah, I'm with you on this. I grew up in Italy, or I grew up in Germany, or I grew up in, so.
Yeah, it's not a surprise how many how many people who went to school together, whether it's Vicenza or other schools in Europe, that ended up getting married.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
There are some happy couples from there. You know, that was our era, the high school sweetheart. This era is not so much the high school sweetheart. It's like the Consumer Digest, wait 10 years, look it out, scope out who you are, develop as a person. And then your career track may take you so far away from that because it's such a competitive market. You know, kids today, this is like turning into news. Kids today in California, you have kids. They graduate high school. They're 18 years old. The rent here is minimal, $2,500 for an apartment. Okay, that's not including $4 gas, a car payment, insurance, medical. So you got to make about $80,000 minimum to get a one-bedroom apartment. Rent a room, chop it down to $70,000. So you don't start at $70K out of school, right? You don't start there. You start over at Burger King, or you start over at Best Buy, or you start as a lifeguard or something. So what changes between our time was the freedom we had to try things. And, you know, like in other states, Missouri, Louisiana or something, you could just work at Burger King and own a house. Out here, you work at Burger King, you're going to share a room with 5 people probably. So you see the differences, right? You see how things have changed for kids from our time to then, right? So I don't know why I get on that subject, but it just made me think about that, you know?
Absolutely. And as a father of a 19 and 21-year-old girl, I'm not in favor of high school sweetheart marriages.
Right. I mean, how are you gonna support that? And also what changes too is they have online dating, so they have endless options. Date somebody today, break up with them tomorrow. There's 5 other people. It's not like when we were younger. Oh, the one and only left. I'll never be the same. Well, and you know, if you had like some dating app, you're like, oh, wait a second. There's 20 other reasons why I don't have to worry about this. And it goes on, but I think people get caught up in buffet mindset that they never taste the essence of what's right for them, you know?
I didn't have a daughter, but I have to imagine, Peter, that some of the dads I know of daughters, the reason that they don't like it is because you know what they're thinking and they're thinking what you're thinking.
Oh,
they know, and you're like, oh my God.
I know what I was like from 15 to 17 to 18.
I remember what I was thinking, and I'm like, you're thinking the same thing about my daughter.
That's right.
That's got to be that's got to be tough to work with.
We're gonna do a whole podcast on this. That's what I recommend. So let's get into review, because I want to do. This is just a preview of what will be happening when we go back and do the podcast and we talk about, you know, Peter's, you know, fashion trends, leather pants, you know, platform shoes, and Mike, you know, different colognes he would wear when he would go to
high karate.
High karate, yeah.
That's not true.
No, so which podcast have you seen, Peter?
So I've seen Mike's. I've seen the Dinges Brothers. Derek, I watched, and Lisa Rolick. Again, for me, it's been a stroll down memory lane. These are names that I haven't heard in dang near 40 years, 4 decades. That seems ludicrous. But then when you hear the name and you see the face, just the flood of instant memories come back.
Yeah.
When Mike and I talked that afternoon after we reconnected, he told a story, and I was like, holy shit, about a story about basketball. There was something that was in, I don't know what filing cabinet in the back of my brain that I hadn't thought about since leaving Italy in the summer of 83. And Mike brings this up, and it was like, wow, there it is. Like, absolutely, I remember that, but I would have never recalled it on my own. So it's been pretty cool. And then, yeah, I am once with Lisa just to reconnect, and then it's like layers. It brings other things back. It's like, okay, there's Lisa, and if I remember the layout of Bellagio, I think she used to live close to us in the like cul-de-sac we lived in. One of her best friends was Jenny Rokas, who was my next door neighbor. Hearing that, you guys have mentioned the Cavoli brothers a couple of times, or Chris and Steve. They were my neighbor on the other side. It just brings back just a whole host of memories, which is taking me down to go dig out my photos from back then, which again, now that we're live, bringing up my favorite Mike Walker photo.
Thank you.
83.
We're gonna have to scan that or take a picture with your phone.
It's not by the way, just for in case anyone's watching, that's not a homemade shirt. It was actually purchased in the store.
Well,
my mom didn't cut my hair, but we did purchase it in probably the PX.
I have a feeling that Mike would have been like a sports show talk host if he did not do what he's doing. That kind of, if he just did what he wanted, that's what he would have done.
He's got a Scott Van Pelt look to him, doesn't he?
Yeah. He's got that thing.
He's a Maryland guy.
Yeah.
Well, so if you want to rank the podcast thus far, and you go from, worst to best, we'll start with Walker's, right?
Yours was good. Yours brought out a lot of people. There's really no worst to best, but let's say your personal taste, like what grabbed you.
We'll just say that was like a waste of someone's, hour and 15 minutes. Look, if I had a vote, in all due respect to others that I've watched and enjoyed, I right now, way out in front of the pack, and I didn't know him personally, but it was Barbara and Cindy. Theirs was so fun to watch.
That was fun.
Look, I want to go bar hopping with them. I just want to say, and I just enjoyed listening to their stories, and they were a great tandem. I could have done another hour of that one. That was fun.
Was it? So I listened to that as well, and you're right. And it actually made me think of listening to my sister, who was a senior when I was a freshman. So she graduated with Derek and those guys. But it made me pull the yearbook out. Cindy was in our class, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those deals where
did you live? Who did you know? So it is
right.
Proximity. If they live next to you, they're hardwired. If they lived in some tertiary side area, but if you were me, who lived there 12 years and get to be a gatekeeper, as they were of Villaggio, they knew Villaggio. I knew Villaggio pretty well towards the end, but they knew it more than me,
And if we'd have been there, through graduation or longer or whatever, then we probably would have gone bar hopping.
Oh yeah. That would have happened. That's pretty cool. So you like that one. What else? What was the other one you liked, Mike?
Well, of course, and because I know David and I enjoyed him and his brother. They were. It was cool. I think it's cool that you've had Sean host a couple with what we would consider the younger generation, and I think in that one you got a little taste of both at the same time. And Peter and I were talking about. It's funny how like in the middle of a sentence almost they just kind of go off and rattle quickly in Italian and then come back into English. But I thought that Eric made a pretty interesting. I had not thought about it before. That if you are half Italian and half American, you're considered not American or not Italian, and being American. I never looked at it that way. I thought that was pretty interesting insight from him. I thought it was good. They were great. They're all good. I mean, they're all good, but I'm sure there are a lot more good ones in front of us.
Well, maybe you expected things to plateau at a certain level, but every one of them's unique. No doubt. And I think just how I want to discover the process of having done a lot of podcasts, I could take somebody that may not have been popular, but they were part of it and they had observations. You could have two people. You could have a pro football player, king of the jocks, and he tells you, then I won the game, then I jumped over a car, then I bench pressed a horse. And then you could have the other one, which would be, I was Billy. I worked over at the barbecue booth, and some of the stuff I saw, and he would share with you his observations, just like, a jeweler at a jewelry store. You're like, this guy just sells jewelry, but he sees like who the town, gold diggers are, or who, the guys that blow their money the most are that come there. They get a unique observation from their point. And I think that gives the whole picture. And somebody who I may not have hung out with, or you may not have hung out with, will give me a perspective, or you a perspective that we had not predicted. Like what was going on in Monteberico. I did not know there was a monster truck rally, but so what about you, Peter? What did you think?
What say that again?
What podcasts were you jamming on? Because it's different times, different people.
Oh, well, first of all, the first one I listened to was Mike. So, and I'm not saying this because he's here, because I'm sure we're going to get into a lot of insults at the end of August when we see each other. But for me, that was the best, just because we were so close there. And it brought back so many vivid memories. Then Cindy and Barbara I agree with Mike. They were funny. They were good. For me, again, it was like listening to my sister, who lived there as well. And I just find my sister to be hilarious, especially because that was the type of trouble that she would get into as well. As a matter of fact, when we moved there in December of '81, halfway through my 8th grade year, and I think it was either day 1 or day 2, my sister hooks up with her group, which I'm not going to mention on here who they were, and I think she gets suspended from school for drinking on day 1 or day 2. So that was a good impression. But it was, I found that one to be hilarious. And the Ninja Brothers were good. I thought that was a good back and forth.
That was a good vibe. It was a good vibe with them. Two different guys, two different styles. One real jock, one more artistic, intellectual. So it wasn't like, Doyle's Rule. It was like two. Which the diversity was really cool. It was very cool insights, and I like how they did pinpoint the Italian American vibe.
Absolutely.
Because we
were David.
On post, it was like, I'm American, and off base, you're like, oh, I'll be a little Italian, and it was weird. And it's like, so some people, I'm gonna bring this back to this one guy. Some people thought he was silly at times on base. I'm not even gonna say his name, but he was American Italian. They're like, oh, what a dork. But at nightclubs, he was Fonzie. He was Italian. Hey, how you doing? Hey, come here. And I'm like, but on the pace, you're like, like, how does that, the duality of that. So you could be really cool in one sector or the other. It was kind of hard to be fully complete in both if you're kind of bipolarly.
Depends where your confidence level is.
Right. Like you might be good in, some pink pants doing wheelies on a moped, or you're going to play hoops over at the base gym. I mean, whichever direction you go.
Absolutely. And I got a kick because, to me, David, again, I hadn't heard or seen David and probably thought of his name in 38 years. And when I see him in the podcast, it's like, that's exactly who I would have expected him to be. Such a gregarious guy. I don't think he's ever met it doesn't appear that he's ever met somebody he didn't like. So that was good. And again, for me, listening to Lisa was great because Lisa and I think rode the same school bus together. I think Lisa was in 8th grade when we were in 9th grade there, a year younger, but I still remember her and her sister Michelle vividly.
Yeah, and Lisa's
what else
great
is awesome?
Podcast.
So it would be unfair to rank them because, like what Peter says, you enjoy them more or less because you have familiarity more or less with whoever is on. But I'll tell you what's cool. What's one thing I noticed, whether it's Monty and Rich from what we consider the
olden days.
Yeah, those old people that would like scare us right before we go into the cafeteria. They're just hanging out for some reason on the table by the door just to intimidate us. I'm kidding. That was no, but from those guys all the way through to everyone you've talked to, here's the one thing that everyone's had in common, which is hilarious to me. And that is, and Lenny, maybe this is a podcast with like, maybe a handful of people, but the theme is this: what in the hell were our parents thinking? That's been the theme. How many people have told stories and they're like, shit, our parents either knew and were like, all right, since you're going with Peter, he seems trustworthy, so it's fine with me. Or they just didn't know. I mean, right. the things we did, and now as parents, I've got the most responsible kid on earth. And I'm not saying that. I mean, he's way more responsible than I am even today. And I still don't think I'd put him on a bus to Spain for a week with a wad of cash. I mean, my dad, my senior year when I was in Germany, my spring break trip to Spain, my dad walks on my bus with 2 cases of Heineken and puts them under the seat in front of me. I kid you not, hands me a wad of money and says, try to stay out of trouble, have fun. Like, the fuck are you thinking? Like, are you?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if you kind of, kill the, the wicked witch or the fear of or whatever and say, go ahead. It almost goes back, and it really didn't have that same effect, but, oh, you're smoking. I'm going to put you in the closet with 2 cartons of cigarettes till you never want to do it again, right? But it wasn't really that message. It wasn't really
But here's the secret. So if there are any parents who happen to be watching these, which I hope there are. I hope
people's kids are watching these.
And that would also be another cool podcast, would be to come on with your mom or dad. Because here's what the parents. No, I can say this. Because my parents.
Mike has amnesty. He doesn't. Okay,
that's exactly right.
Right.
But here's the thing. It's not one of those things where, they trusted us and we went off on our own and we just had a good time and made memories. We went and did dangerous, crazy ass, maybe borderline illegal stuff, and
maybe
and it's like,
maybe, perhaps.
What in the hell were they thinking?
Oh yeah.
Like I remember the community commander coming into our gym a couple, 2, 3, 4 days before spring break, whatever it was, had everybody who was going on spring break in the gym, Class A uniform on, very formal, walks in. We all knew him, he was a football referee, so we all knew him, but he was very serious. And this was at a time where Muammar Gaddafi was drawing lines in the sand and taunting Americans. And, I guess in those times it was a tense situation and they wanted us. So he came in and he said, look, we want y'all to have fun, but try not to stand out too much as Americans. Try to keep a low profile, have fun, don't antagonize anyone, blah, 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 blah. And everyone went home, completely changed what they had packed, threw in all their American flag beach towels and their OP shorts and everything we could to make ourselves as American as we could.
It's true. It's like, okay, we're going to teach the kids tradecraft. You're now secret agents in a foreign country. We're going to give you German soccer team shirts and some Italian shoes and change your hairstyle. But
dude, we could have been kidnapped. We could have been kidnapped. And as long as we had, some beer and a couple buddies with us, we're like, all right.
Yeah.
It was the adventure. It was like, but it's different when you become in the military and you kind of detach yourself a little bit from that part when you're like the serious officer that Peter was, or, me, the fun guy. It just depends. But
who was telling the story about, Lenny, who was it telling the story? Was it, who was telling the story about going over to General McFadden's house and the Carbonari coming out?
Oh yeah, I know who that was. That was
a great
Mike Petty.
Yeah, Mike, that was a great look. That was a great testimony, man. That was awesome. It's like these guys come out with submachine guns. And
yeah.
I mean, that made me think of a story. I don't have to tell my stories. I have so many. I think I was 19. I was talking to some general's daughter that was a little older than me. I was just bored. I'm like, let's see what's up over here. Of course, dating over there was like, I don't know, man. It might as well been friggin' some religious compound of sorts where everybody had to be holier than whatever. But that wasn't evolving, but I was partying over at their house. I'm at the general's house. I'm throwing beer cans at the Carbonari guard shack. I'm like, that's a boy. I'm just like throwing stuff. I'm like, what are you going to do now, huh? Look where I'm at. It was kind of like, yeah, I see you follow me around. And the irony is, and I found this out the other day. This is just for this plug. You remember I told you I get in some trouble, right, over there for some, hashish, like a joint.
You were a terrible human, we know.
Okay, here's the hypocrisy. Those that judge you are no better than you by a million miles in that
God.
way. Somebody shared with me that all the MPs, they were doing a drug dog thing, and he was there, and the sergeant major said, okay, we're going to give you 5 minutes of amnesty. Hash came flying out the windows of all the MP barracks. Okay, so what was that all about? That's all I got to say.
You know what you should have done? You should have planted the drugs on another drug dog, and it would have confused them.
Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll volunteer to be a narc, and we're going to go busting you, and a snake eating its tail in a circle. Okay, yeah. How about leave me alone? But I get it. Am I mad about it? I'm like, I'm not surprised by it. I'm like, the hypocrisy never ends sometimes. So if you had gotten a label for doing something bad, either losing a game or getting a bad grade or, wrecking your bike in front of somebody at the wrong time, whatever you did, really didn't mean that much. But it's like when you're a kid, you add volume to it in your head, right? So,
absolutely.
Some people.
Plus there's like 100 of us there. We all knew. I mean, for the most part, we're pretty aware of what was going on with. If something was happening, everybody, knew or eventually knew.
Well, as much as there's a beautiful surface, it was a great.
It's true experience. True for the adults too, by the way.
Oh yeah, the adults were not so innocent. Adults, if you're listening to this, we know about you, but we have not. Let's blast the adults because we're talking as children. Only 40 years later, we're 50-year-old children hosting a podcast right now.
To that point, I wholeheartedly disagree with Mike. Is I'd never bring my parents on here. No way in hell. Now, I didn't start doing things until 10th grade, until I moved to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, is when I started my role, and I was sheep in wolf's clothing. I was the kid that most parents liked, and they didn't know what was happening behind the scene. I think I was still a good kid, but I was still doing things I should have been doing. But as a 52-year-old man, and my mother's going to be 80 in less than a month, and my father will be too, no way in hell do I want to hear stories. No.
We're not going to have her relive the skating rink stories of Kentucky. Right?
Yeah. Maybe you get the parents only and then play like a Cougar Land Podcast game to see if you can match the parent with the student.
I think that's even a worse idea, Mike, because there's been stories that come out from my childhood.
I'm going to go with my assistant director, Peter West, over here.
I'm not saying there's some, legal forms that might need to get filled out.
I can tell you the 5 stories that my dad's going to tell, and none of them are good.
Yeah. I mean, that's he blew all his money, drinking on the weekend, and he had to pay for his trip to the ski trip. And I was asking where the money was. So he went down to Monteberico and played a flute that he got from band camp and made enough money to pay for his ski trip. We're waiting for one of those, perhaps. But,
It was a drunk one. He loves to tell my girls the stories now that I got dropped off my senior year in high school. I think it was a senior or freshman in college. But anyway, I got dropped off. My buddies pretty much kicked me out of the car at 3 o'clock in the morning, go into the house. And for some reason, well, I know exactly why, because it was South Alabama, and the way we partied was we stood around these fires that we'd throw tires into. And so I get home at 3 in the morning, and I'm like, I gotta have a shower, and I'm just I'm obliterated. And in my state, I'm thinking, I'll be quieter if the lights are out. I don't know.
Yeah.
My bathroom connected to my parents' bedroom, to their bathroom, which connected to their bedroom. And all of a sudden, I hear my dad get up, and I shut the water on. And the door is closed in the bathroom, and he comes in, and he opens the door. The lights are out, so he closes it. I'm like, all right, I'm safe. The next thing I know, the door opens again, the lights come on, and there I am hanging out of the side of the shower. And he loves to tell that story to this day.
Probably because the bathroom smelled like burning tires.
Exactly.
It's one of your shining moments. There are endless stories, man. We will dig into these. I'm going to come back and dig those out of you. Who else are you guys waiting to see? You like seeing Barbara and Cindy? and maybe even doing a podcast with them together. That might be fun, huh? You guys like that idea? Yeah.
Well, yeah, look, you asked this, I think, before, and all I will say, what I've learned in doing this and then watching is, for anyone watching who hasn't done it, and I totally, get, it's because I use Zoom for work, and I don't, whatever, it's just comfortable, it's just conversation. And so if you are watching and you haven't done it, and you got some stories or some people that you want to talk to that maybe you haven't in a while, that this is a great forum for this. So, so far, Lenny, I think you've hit home runs so far. These are great, and
Sean's had some pretty good ones too. I'm glad he backs me up. Like, I had trouble booking some this week because people have life that gets in the way, and I understand that. But Sean, you get a lot of his classmates. He was 3 years younger. So when I went off to the Navy, he was still in Vicenza for 3 years in his prime years. So there's a lot of people from that era that I could talk to as strangers, but familiar strangers, because my dad was probably their coach, or that teacher was there and that bar was there. And those routines were there until the next maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And then a lot of it changed. But I think it's great. And it's like, hey, good. You pick some up. Great. I'll back off. Who you talking to? I'll grab that one. But this podcast is different than any other podcast. This ain't Joe Rogan. This is everybody that was on the same wild vacation. And as kids,
Lenny, I learned that when you were interviewing the Dingers brothers, and your wife comes home with the groceries, you exit stage right on the podcast and say, I got to go help my wife get the groceries out and continue on.
Well, when your wife is significantly younger, you have to, do things that you might not when you're old. I'm kidding. But you get my point. No, it's just like,
if you need to run out to the garage and take care of a quick task, we'll hold down the fort.
You guys will keep rocking. I'm going to a barbecue today, see some friends that have been isolated as we have been isolated. Right now we were sitting here, my wife and I, like, are we staying in California? Are we going to North Carolina? We're kind of looking at where our next trip is. Like, we're mobile, man. I have not locked down hard here. There was a time in my life where I was building a base of cement, and then I realized I like to move. Like, we want to go to Europe. We want to go all over. And since my wife's a traveler, I'm like, yeah, man, let's go. But then that's all the more reason to do this, so I can run into everybody when I go through different places, and I can meet you guys. And
I hope we
absolutely,
man, I hope we figure all this stuff out so we can go back to being able to travel and not even thinking about stuff like that anymore. It's starting to, I can tell you, in this household, it's starting to wear us out.
I hope what this leads to, what you've created here, you and your brother, I can't call you Lynn, I got to call you Lenny, is what I hope I've heard a couple of people mention reunions that have happened across the country in the past, but I hope that this leads to, in the near future, when we're all past this, the COVID business, that a few more reunions, because I sure as heck would like to see a lot of people that we grew up with and spent time with, even though it was short for me. I was only there for 18 months, but man, what an impact on my life that it's had.
I want it to go beyond reunions, which it is. People are calling each other. People had each other as a friend on Facebook for 10 years. Haven't said a lick. Hey, nice dog. And then boom. And then it goes back to that old day before the internet where, they didn't call me, so I didn't call them. And they didn't. And then people think there's an actual beef, but they're, being in sales most of my life, pick up the phone. I don't care. Tell me, don't call me. I was like, okay, good. I won't call you. Have a nice day. But I'm a salesperson, so I'm hardened with rejection, where some people might be a little more emotional about making that step, right? They're like, I don't want to call Billy, but like it was Monty Stokes, his podcast, where he talked about telling his wife, and she was from the States, so she didn't have our experience. We know that our bond with each other, we were all on a, starring movie. If the cast of Star Wars called each other up, they'd probably meet up. You know what I mean? Because it was a significant experience to them. So looking
and
back.
plus,
you know,
and plus, look at what Peter just said, and not, just to come back to that real quick. So you said something which is true, but works two ways, right? What you just said was 18 months and the impact that the experience had on you. At the same time, I couldn't tell you the first time I met. I don't remember. So you got there in what, Christmas break of your
Of 81, yeah.
So that would be 8th grade, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I have no idea the first time we crossed paths. I don't remember that. But here's what I do remember. I remember all of a sudden I had a good friend named Peter West. Like, that just happened. Like, it didn't take a year. It just happened. Like, all of a sudden I got a new friend named Peter West, and whether it was hoops in the gym or what it was, boom, we were friends just like that. Yeah. And so the community had an impact on you that's lasting. At the same time, you came in there, and in 18 months, you had an impact as well. And that's the way this deal works.
Absolutely.
We get pictures. Like, if you get any pictures, Peter, please take pictures of them with your phone and send them to me by email.
Don't do that.
Anything with Mike, you know, and
I will contact your parents.
High tops and tight jeans.
I will have your mom on it.
Yeah, that's how it works. So no, but it's like, you got to look at this. So here we are, and I live in California, life in the past lane. People here, like, don't talk about the past, it's about the future, focus on the now. It's almost like go, 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 go. This is the land of Elon Musk and Facebook and Apple and everything that's invented electronically. And the culture is get it, right? So it's like Wolf of Wall Street of electronics. And thinking about the past, man, that's lame. But then the people that tell me this did not have our past. And I have talked to some Vicenza people that are hesitant to talk about the past. Well, nobody remembered me. It's not a thing. I'm going to turn it off. Close friend of mine. And I'm like, really? I go, really? You're in denial. You are anti-socializing yourself, but other things have happened in their lives. So I don't blame them to take that stance. You know what I mean? Not everybody's going to be like this, right?
Dude, yeah. You're talking to two people who left in 9th grade, and you're not talking to some of the, what I called the first time, the heavy hitters. We aren't those names, and most people probably don't remember us, and you know, and that's cool. But we were there, and we got some stories, and we remember it, and we love it, and it's all good, man. It's you know,
it built who we are. There's no doubt.
We're Vicenza Cougars, man.
Yeah, that's how it works. Well, there's people that you would consider the heavy hitters, but they don't consider themselves the heavy hitters, and that's the honest truth. Like, they may have been portrayed, right? You know, they're just like, I was glad to be there too with you, man. High five. I mean, really, that's how most people, I think, feel, whether they're big time or living in a van down by the river.
Look, when I was in 7th grade and like whatever grade, Derek Gould, I mean, Peter, you can attest to this. Derek Gould was like, he was, you know, he was the shit. You know, he was cool, and we weren't, but it's funny listening to him and listening to some of the things he went through and some of the adversity he went through that we didn't know, because he just had cool ass long hair that I didn't have, because obviously in that picture that clears that up. But I mean, you're right, Lenny. You're right. Is people's perception of themselves is different than what other people's were, and in the big scheme of life, those perceptions kind of don't matter now.
Well, here's a good one for you. I remember something simple as this. I don't know who the face is or whatever, but some guy was watching another guy that was breaking up with one girlfriend to date another. And this guy couldn't get a girlfriend to save his life. And he's like, hey, I wish I had his problems. But would you today wish that you had your friend who's going through his 2nd or 3rd divorce's problems? No, you wouldn't. You know, but as a kid, it's perception. You're thinking, you know, scarcity. What is more? I wish I could be more of that. That guy gets to play a lot of basketball. Yeah, but, you know, he sleeps on a couch or whatever. That girl he's dating is really mean, and you don't know it. You don't know the whole story, but you see the surface. That guy's a big, studly athlete. Yeah, but he's only hoping that he gets through the math test, because his dad says if it's not, he's going to send him to a crappy school in the middle of nowhere, and he has his going hard on something, so he's stressed out. So just those little elements where you don't see the whole thing. That's the stuff. To me, what I like about the podcast, this is before anybody had a political party. None of us did. We were talking about everything in the news, unless it was pertaining to a general getting kidnapped or the Red Brigade or whatever. But still,
remember that.
Still it's observations, right? So here we are. We knew each other before the internet, before mass media, before the bullshit. That's like, which side is right? You're going to pick a side today? What cup of Kool-Aid are you drinking? We are talking to people that we knew each other at a pure, genuine level. At par, right?
Well, and so when we exited the military in '98, we did it because we wanted to raise a family, and we did it. I wanted to raise a family in a more stable environment that I grew up in, because we moved around. I went from Mannheim, Germany to Italy to Fort Campbell to Alabama, and then spent 7 years moving around as well. So I wanted to raise kids in a more stable environment. Now, that being said, I wouldn't trade what we did for the world, because it made us who we are. It made us be able to talk to people. And to this day, I think because of our experiences of moving around in the military, and like you said, Mike, and we don't remember when we became friends, but all of a sudden we were friends in 1981 when I moved there, because you had to. You had to find your people and adapt and survive and enjoy yourself. I think that's still formidable for me today. But even then, I still had to ask my wife, should I reach out to Mike Walker, one of my best friends from 9th grade, 38 years ago? How sad is that?
I was stunned.
Yeah.
I was sitting in my recliner watching TV. My phone buzzes on the arm of the chair, and I look up and I saw your message, and there was no one in the house or that could hear me, and I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. I don't think I've had some surprises in the past with some folks from the past, but I've never been caught that flat-footed. And your wife was right. She's obviously a very smart lady.
Well, I mean, you two guys probably played with the wind-up Evel Knievel toy together that did wheelies. Or remember those little, I brought that up, I'm going to wrap this in a second. Remember those little video games that we had? Those ones that we get at
football,
the
and
basketball?
Yeah.
And yeah. Right.
Remember when you got the ones that you could pass the ball for the first, you could make a pass? Yeah. That was like the kick-ass, yeah.
You just got up in the corner and ran for a touchdown. No, I remember that. But That was something that was our era. And, there's so much more depth to this, and it's a positive thing, especially in the times that we live in right now. We could focus on the negative, or we can, and people go, why are you digging? Why are you living in the past? Like, my past was better than your future, in some cases. You know what I mean?
So Lenny, one of the questions that you ask most of the folks, which is a good question, is, hey, what'd you do for fun? What'd you do in your spare time? And one of the things that hasn't been talked about yet is, and for us three, because of our age and the time in which we were there, look, there was nothing. So we didn't get, or at least I didn't get live football. We didn't get live sports. We didn't get any of that stuff. You know what we got? We got the first of the 509th Airborne Battalion Combat Team football. That was the greatest thing in that community on Saturday, to go to the North 40 and watch those crazy paratroopers with their war paint on. And they'd come in and do like a 6-man stack and put the football at the 50-yard line. And Lenny, I don't know if you remember this kid. I don't even know why I remember his name, but this is going way back. A kid named Jim Parker, who when I was in 6th grade, he was a 5th grader. He was this little tiny kid, and I guess his dad was on the coaching staff or something. But their pregame prep was the coolest thing I ever saw. And they'd take Jim Parker and throw him up in the air, and whoever their opponent was beaten before kickoff. because these guys were nuts. And I don't remember what year it was, whether it was 80 or 81 or even 82. I don't remember the exact year. I mean, look, the 509 did not lose, right? They did not lose, except for one CTAF game, which I remember. But one year they went undefeated and unscored on, and the commanding general of the 509th put a full-page Stars and Stripes ad out because the Air Force played football up in England and in Germany and some maybe Belgium or whatever. He put an ad out to any American team in Europe to come down and play the 509th. And I think a team from like Hanau came down. They were like the Air Force champions.
Wow.
And the
different culture, different specialty.
They just beat the shit out of them. And then they bring in like the professional. There was a guy there named Ray Simcoe who was like an official, and he got involved in the Italian professional league. And so they bring so-called Italian professional teams.
I remember that.
On post. And these guys, they would watch the 509th just simply warm up. And then they'd get their, it was all they could do to keep the score from 100. Like they would just get their ass kicked. But a 509th game was the event in the fall in Vicenza. And then CTAF somehow came up with some ringers from God knows where. And in one season, they put together a team that was pretty competitive. And I think they beat the 509th like 7-6 once or something. It was a pretty big deal. And you know what, guys? I don't know if you remember this. There was a guy for CTAF who, and we did this because we did it, the kids did it in DYA. He took these little, those little fringe ball trim things and he sewed them to the side of his socks, and he was like their kick returner. And all I remember is his name was Go-Go. And if he got the ball, he scored. And so everyone, there were 4 or 5 of us that sewed these little fringe. We'd have our mom go to some, wherever the arts and crafts were to get this so that we could have socks like Go-Go. And, but look, that 509 football, that was the shit, man. That was 509 football and a booster burger. That's what it was about.
We're gonna do another cast. I appreciate your guys' time. I have to run to a barbecue. What a way to end a podcast. This can go on for 12 hours, especially amongst men drinking beer like both of you. And we will go more in depth with Peter West and Dr. Mike Walker. Dr. Mike Walker? I mean, what? No, I'm kidding. Anyways, guys, this is going to go on today. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Lenny. Peter, we'll see you shortly. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
See you guys soon. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Appreciate it.